For the committee members, I want to draw your attention. So Alan Conroy did get this right for us with the legislative post-audit. And what I do want to draw your attention to is something that, as the meeting was kind of winding down, JG was able to find for us immediately, show me. If you turn to page 5, that is a pretty significant bar chart. And it was brought to my attention yesterday as I was driving home that, well, you didn't do a very good job of explaining Capers 1. I made reference to the caret and the 85, but I'm not sure that everyone understood what I was talking to. So Capers 1 used to be the only Capers that we had for educators and for others that were in public service, and they had a formula, and that formula was 85, and it took the number of years of service that you were in plus your age, and you had to serve X number of years to be qualified. But if adding the number of years of service and your age came up to 85, then you were eligible for full retirement through Capers. When we developed Capers 2, there was no formula. It was just after X number of years of service, depending on the number of years of service would be what portion you would receive, and you had to have X number of years to be fully vested. Capers 3, even less, but the interesting thing is part of the reason that you see that retirement is so significant in Capers 1 is because so many folks have met that 85. And it was something that, interestingly enough, teachers at the start of a school year would kind of talk to each other during in-service. So where are you on 85? And they would say, oh, in 5 years, I'll be at 85 or something like that. And they were really kind of looking at that. And then they would decide if they wanted to go beyond 85. And many did choose to do that. Senator Dietrich. There you go, exactly. So there are those that, you do. So there are those, yes. So the reason you see so many as far as retirement is because so many have met that goal of the 85. And when you look at Capers 3, the other thing that was pointed out to me on my drive with a different phone call, I was so happy there were so many people watching and participating, you know, paying attention to the hearing. But one of the things that they pointed out with regard to Capers 3 is that's the only thing right now. So if you get hired right now, or since 2015, that was your only option is Tier 3, period. And what was pointed out by this individual was that they had a career in business and industry, started a family, and then went and earned their degree to become a teacher. And so we often think of someone that's going to start teaching is just out of college. Well, they are oftentimes just out of college, but they're not necessarily just 21 or 22 years old. For those that have that professional experience, and we've talked about alternative certification as well, for those that have already have a bachelor's degree and have perhaps been in business and industry. So when we're talking about what is appealing, we do need to keep in mind that the folks going into Tier 3 are any age. They really are any age. And that was something that the sheriff spoke to with regard to that they can have, I say kids because he mentioned 18-year-olds, and those are kids in my book, but they can start working for the department and they're immediately on that Capers as well. So just wanted to bring this go through this. I think we'll probably have some more questions. I know that Alan Conroy is going to be getting us some more information beyond just what's in this, but it will give you a full-fledged feel for Capers 3. I know that there is a hearing today in FI&I on the House side on a similar mirror bill, so we'll see what happens with that. So we are going to go ahead and move forward on our hearing, which is House Bill 2645, and that is amending the Nursing Service Scholarship Program to remove limits on the amounts of awards. So let's go ahead with an overview from our reviser. Welcome back to the podium, Tamara.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good afternoon, committee. House Bill 2645, as amended by House Committee, would amend the Nursing Service Scholarship Program. First, I'm going to talk about how the program is currently structured, and then I'll go into what the bill does. So currently, the program requires applicants to enter into agreements with a sponsor, and under the agreement, the sponsor provides half of the scholarship amount, and in return, the scholarship recipient agrees to work as a nurse for the sponsor within 6 months of licensure. The number of scholarships currently awarded in the program is capped at 250, with 100 of those being reserved for students with a sponsor from a rural area. The executive director of the Board of Regents, in consultation with the Nursing Service Scholarship Review Committee, determines which applicants qualify for a scholarship. If a scholarship recipient fails to satisfy the obligations of the scholarship agreement, the recipient is required to repay the scholarship amount with interest at the federal plus rate, plus 5 percentage points. So that's how the program is currently structured. House Bill 2645 would amend the Nursing Service Scholarship Program by eliminating the cap on the number of scholarships awarded, including the rural area provisions, requiring each scholarship recipient to complete the FAFSA each academic year, and removing the requirement for sponsorship. But this version of the bill does keep an option for sponsorship. The recipient would be required to engage in the practice of nursing for the length of time the recipient received financial assistance. The bill would also authorize the executive officer to establish the amount of each scholarship. If the applicant does have a sponsor, the amount of the scholarship could not exceed the amount set by the executive officer, multiplied by 125%. The bill would set the interest rate on repayments of scholarship amounts for failure to satisfy agreement obligations to a flat 5%. And I will note that this is very similar to House Bill 2644, which proposes to do across-the-board service scholarships administered by the State Board of Regents to do the repayment obligations all the same. Finally, the bill would abolish the Nursing Service Scholarship Review Committee by repealing KSA 743299. I did include the text of that statute so you could see it in the revisor memorandum. This bill did pass the House on a vote of 119 to 0 and would take effect upon publication in the Kansas Register, and I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Committee, what questions do you have? Senator Petty.
So Tamara, there's no limit on the number of scholarships?
Yes, so if you look on page 3 of the bill in section 2, so you can see where it's stricken. There kind of toward the bottom in line 29, it strikes that it shall not exceed 250.
And I guess it's in current language already that the person does not have to be a resident to apply for the nursing scholarship. So what I see in section 2 already there, that looks like it must be current law.
Let me double check on that for you.
And then Madam Chair.
You may.
And there's no limit on the amount of the scholarship as well?
So under the bill, the executive director of the Board of Regents would set the scholarship amount.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. No further questions. Thank you so much. We'll bring up our proponent testimony. It is from Dr. Blake Flanders, President and CEO of the Kansas Board of Regents. Welcome to the committee. So you can, if you want to kind of start with answering the question about the residency.
Yes, so currently they do not have to be a resident, but their service has to be in Kansas. So it's.
There we go. So welcome, and This has come to us from the House. It's got some amendments in there, so fill us in on if there are any concerns about what got added in or got changed, or if it's where the regents are comfortable with it being.
Yeah, so good afternoon. Thank you for allowing me to appear. This nursing scholarship, we've taken a look at this scholarship and said, okay, now in the current context, how can we candidly just create more nurses? Because right now, when we started addressing nursing shortages was actually in 2006 with the Nursing Act, where we opened up those RN programs to increase by 250 slots. What we found is they actually increased by more than that because we had a competitive component in there among the colleges, and we included, and the independent colleges were included in that as well. And so that was very successful and appeared to be in the short term that we were making headway there. What we probably didn't factor in is in 2008, and really in 9 and 10 then, individuals didn't retire at the same rates. Because we had a recession, if you remember, so people, as the 401ks dipped, they said, well, we're going to continue to work for a few extra years. And then all of a sudden we had a large retirement coupled with a global pandemic. And so we see ourselves with acute shortages. Now, since this, we also had a Promise Act passed that is another way to scholarship students at the two-year college level. And so at the two-year college, they can receive 2 types of certifications. Nursing's a little nuanced on this, different than any program that I've ever seen, in that the RN credential can also be a BSN or an associate degree level nurse. So we have the Promise Act that we utilize for those RNs and LPN nurses, which is typically about a year. Then this has been somewhat underutilized, and we've asked people in the program what the barriers were. One of those was the sponsor, finding someone to sponsor them as they went through college. And so initially we said, well, we'll eliminate that requirement to make it as easy as possible to get people in. There was some concerns with that, so we worked with the Kansas Health Association to mitigate those concerns. We came up with a compromise that said if you can choose to get a sponsor, your award can be larger. With a sponsor, the sponsor needs to be in a rural opportunity zone so that we can still ensure that we get nurses in some of our rural communities that have more difficulty hiring. And then, so along with that, it seemed that with that compromise, the House seemed very comfortable with the bill, and you saw the tallies in terms of votes. We did have a separate issue in that as many of these scholarship programs were set up, at each period of time, the service obligations were somewhat tweaked in terms of when you went into default and when you didn't, and the interest rates. We wanted to align all that, and that's why we're also asking to include the contents of 2644 that was unanimously kicked out of the committee and just didn't have enough time before turnaround to get above the line. And so what that essentially would do is just align those so we know we have alignment on when people go into repayment and when they're in default of the agreements. So with that, I'd stand for any questions.
So committee, what questions do you have for Dr. Flanders? Senator Straub.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So this only requires these students to, they've fulfilled it as long as they're working during their education years. It doesn't require them to stay and practice in Kansas beyond their residency?
They practiced in Kansas for the amount of time that they went
to school.
to school.
So if they went to school for 4 years.
4 years, they'd give 4 years.
They would be required to remain in Kansas for an additional 4. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you very much. We'll move to the next bill. And now we'll close the hearing on House Bill 2645, and we'll move to our hearing on Senate Bill 2646, modifying the financial limitations on awards under the Kansas Heroes Scholarship Act and broadening the eligibility requirements for the reward. So we will have, again, an overview of that bill from the reviser.
Thank you again, Madam Chair. House Bill 2646 would amend the Kansas Heroes Scholarship Act with regard to eligibility for military service-connected recipients and would also modify the maximum limitation for reimbursement to institutions. So on the eligible military service-connected recipients, currently, the Act requires post-secondary educational institutions to waive charges for tuition and fees for certain individuals, including dependents and spouses of public safety officers who are injured, disabled, or died while performing their official duties, prisoners of war, dependents and spouses of any military service member who is injured, disabled, or died after September 11th, 2001 as a result of serving in military service, and dependents and spouses of any military service member entitled to compensation for a service-connected disability of at least 80% for injuries sustained after September 11th, 2001. House Bill 2646 would remove the September 11th, 2001 date so that the spouse or dependent of a military service member who suffered an injury, disability, or death at any time would be eligible. Additionally, the bill would clarify the eligibility language for a military service member who suffered death, disability, or injury while serving in military service. And you can see the specifics of those changes on page 4 in lines 7 through 16. Now, switching to the maximum limitation for reimbursements, currently the statute limits the total reimbursements to $500,000. This bill would strike that limitation so that reimbursement would be allowed up to the aggregate limit established by the State Board of Regents based on annual appropriations. This bill would take effect upon publication in the Kansas Register and did pass the House on a vote of 118 to 1, and I will be happy to answer any questions.
I think the question is, who was that one person that voted no and why? So, Senator Blasey.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Help me understand. I'm trying to find the definition in the bill. It looks like on page 2 it explains that defines injured or disabled. So I'm curious, does this bill limit persons who are in active duty or service who are injured or disabled by a service-related event, or is it just someone who happens to be maybe an officer or a firefighter or member of the military on a Saturday driving and happens to be in an accident and they're therefore injured or disabled, they qualify under this act? Or is it service-related injuries or disabilities? Because I know in tax committee we have a bill that I think specifically defines it as service-related event. Didn't know how vague or broad this bill was.
Yeah, so then if you look on page 4, which is after the definitions, kind of at the top, it does talk about eligible dependents or spouses of public safety officers, for example, who are injured or disabled while performing their duties as a public safety officer. So it does include that specification.
Senator Straub.
Thank you, Madam Chair. How many other states have a similar type scholarship program?
I will look into that and get back to you.
Senator Petty.
Thank you. I'm just going to follow up on Senator Blasey's question. So I was looking at, on page 4 at letter, I guess, or 2I, under letter B. It says, so it says sustained an injury or disability that rendered the serviceman incapable of continuing such serviceman's military service. That doesn't necessarily mean that they got the injury in the service. Does it?
I'm seeing a nod from the back, so we can address that unless the reviser would like to address that.
I'm happy to defer the questions to the experts.
Okay. Is there any other question that we have specifically for the reviser? Seeing none, thank you. They're still conferring. So whenever you're ready, we have proponent testimony from Dr. Blake Flanders, again, President and CEO of the Kansas Board of Regents. So welcome right back to the podium.
I thank you, Chair Baumgardner. And in fact, that question was one of the reasons we're here. So the standard for the police officers and the military is slightly different. The former is during service, and then with the military, we've changed that language, sustained an injury that rendered or disability that rendered the service member incapable of continuing such service member's military service, or is entitled to compensation from the United States Department of Veterans Affairs for a service-connected disability. So we worked actually with Representative Croft on this, who had quite a bit of experience, because we did have situations where we don't want the agency to be put in as a place where fundamentally we're almost making law. We want the law to be clear on who qualifies and who does not. So that connection to service could be well after the service is complete. In other words, if you sustained, I'm just give an example, if you sustained heart damage while you were in service, then if you had an event after that service was complete, that your dependents would still qualify. So that was that, and they make that determination. Veterans Affairs makes those determinations and are probably the best positioned to do that. I would say we've worked closely in terms of what other states do this. So we've worked closely with a group called Folds of Honor. Folds of Honor helps family members who have lost individuals in service in the military. The CEO of that group has told me that he believes we have one of the best programs in the nation in terms of the comprehensive nature of that. And then we've worked to leverage their aid, then can go more to housing and some of the things not covered, as opposed to paying tuition, because our state does pay the tuition. So many people and dependents can't go back to college, not maybe because of the tuition, but because of the other expenses that are incurred while you're attending the college or university. So with that, we see the utilization rates do increasing. It's an award that is substantial, and we expect the utilization rate to continue to increase.
Senator, please.
So I certainly understand and agree that I think a lot of our persons of public service sometimes have challenges long after their service. I think we saw that in Vietnam. A lot of veterans today are suffering from things that happened decades ago. But I'm wondering if that language should be tightened to clarify that, because I think that Senator Petty pointed out in double I on line 10, it doesn't quite say service-related injury. It's broad to say any injury or disability. And House Bill 2036, the revisor writes, to qualify for homestead property exemption, it's based on a service-connected disability from the United States Department of Veteran Affairs. I wonder if we should use that language to just ensure that it is service-connected, to meet your intention of what you just stated.
Yeah, I'm fine with that. We're open to any language that gives us enough clarity that we don't have these cases where someone might qualify with Veterans Affairs and then doesn't qualify for our scholarship. So again, at the time, we worked with Representative Croft, who had that background, but I'd be open to, certainly we'd be open to any changes that needed to be made.
So that way we would have that consistency in different areas, scholarship, tax, so forth. Senator Dietrich.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So thank you for being here. Quick question.
Is your mic on?
Yes, my mic is on. I'll just speak a little louder, sorry. So we've struck the maximum amount, the $500,000. Does that mean you've exceeded that in the past?
So for FY23, we had a proviso that removed that because we went to 618,000.
That's what you spent?
Yeah, and then this year, we're expecting 1.65 million.
So that's good to know. So at some point, I think we probably just need to be able to track that, because that's kind of like an open checkbook, right? and that's a significant increase. So we probably need to know that. I'm not on Ways and Means or appropriations, but I'm just thinking that would be good to know.
Yeah, so as the word gets out in the communities, it has more utilization.
Sure, thank you.
So could you share with us, how many people do you think are participating right now in the program?
We have 187 students.
Okay. I think that's good to know. Committee, oh, I'm sorry. Senator Sykes.
Thank you. So you said there's 187 and you went from 618,000 to,
We had 87 students.
so you had
Went to-
87.
We had 87. We went to 187. Obviously, it's going to start to flatten, but we just don't know where that is. And we like the language of saying subject to appropriation so that individuals know that if the money is there, we will give you the scholarship, and if it's not, we can't.
And that increase in 100s, do you think it was just word of mouth marketing, or was there a significant campaign to help get that out?
We didn't have any resource to do outreach or marketing. We market where we can in a low-cost way, so we connected with, like I said, Folds of Honor and some of those groups that are linked into those military communities. And apparently it started to pay off, but it's an attractive scholarship.
So are you encumbering the money, or that's just what the cost was for that year? It's not for future years?
Not for future years, no.
Okay. But,
So if we were ever just a few dollars short, we would go try to seek authority to move money from maybe an underutilized scholarship. But at the rate that this is increasing, that option will be limited because there won't be enough undersubscribed scholarships to finance this.
so right now, we're looking, I just want to circle back around with 2645. Your ask is that the language from 2644 be added to it. And I think what's been discussed for this hearing with regard to 2646, the discussion was to add the language or to change the language that's consistent with what's in tax language.
Okay.
To coincide. Is there, House Bill 2036. So any other types of amendments that you are bringing to us that we need the reviser to work on?
I think that concludes what we have.
Okay, and let's go ahead and get that with the tax language. And Senator Gossage, did you have a question?
I do. I have the same concern that was mentioned by some of my colleagues regarding the injury or disability, in that someone could get injured on a job or, have a car accident or whatever. It has nothing related to their military service. And then we're giving them preferential treatment over somebody that also got injured on the job, or but they didn't serve in the military. Because the way I read this, it says incapable of continuing such service members military. So are we saying they're currently in the military?
No, they would not necessarily have to be. We're fine with any language this body comes up with. We just want it to be very clear for us who gets the award. And so what we did is we had alignment, I believe, with Veterans Affairs. I know that once you've concluded service, you could have a situation where because of your service, you had, again, I gave the example of the heart condition or something like that. Where we are as an agency is we just want to be clear what this body wants. And so if you want to make it narrower, that would be not aligned with the House position, but you could go back and forth there. We just want to be sure that we're clear so we can make the awards. we don't want to be trying to make an award with language that's not clear.
It appears to me that we've expanded this substantially, and I'm actually quite concerned about what the fiscal note would be. This being new language, and we've already seen that it's what, tripled? You know, from what it was before. And I'm also wondering why we're striking because of a public statute and the September the 11th, 2001. Why was that stricken?
So we've had, so there's a number of individuals that want, just because it was before September 11th, would like to be eligible.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Senator Straub.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And this is probably not something that Dr. Flanders can answer, but maybe we could get this information from Veterans Affairs. Currently, what are the numbers of medically disabled, or is it physical injury or physical disability or mental illness? I know there are full medical discharges for mental illness. While I was a service member's wife, one of my husband at the time, his platoon members actually had a mental illness case and was given a full medical discharge. So I just want to see numbers on what those categories are. You know, there's also combat wounded. I'm not advocating against any of them in particularly, just want to see what the actual numbers are that we're dealing with. Thank you.
Is that something that the Board of Regents has access to that information, or do we need legislative research to work on that?
I would believe we need legislative research. If we have it quick and ready, we'll do that, but I don't think we will. We can look. Okay.
So perhaps if you work in conjunction with, they're going to call you anyway. Yeah. And so if you work back and forth and get that to us, I think that would be helpful. And I think then we can, based on that information, if we can get it by the first part of next week, that gives us time to come up with some potential amendments and to give some consideration to that. I think it also might be helpful if you have some data about just who has been participating and share that with us. That would be great. Okay?
All right.
Thank you so much. Oh my gosh. Look who came to see Senate Education Committee. We are in trouble now. So committee, I am going to close the hearing on Senate Bill 2646 at this time. And we are going to transition to something else. And we're going to start off. We're just making Senate education a little bit more interesting. So go ahead.
Okay. This is a Kansas Senate tribute. Be it hereby known to all that the official recognition is extended to J.G. Scott. Numbers, numbers, and more numbers. That has always been the professional focus of our friend, colleague, and budget work, J.G. Scott, for over 30 years. Whether the Kansas Senate has been working on millions or billions in expenses, revenues, headcounts, or FTE, J.G. Scott has always been ready with a quick, accurate data point or an estimate. His expertise has benefited the Senate legislators from all sides of the aisle in planning sessions, committee hearings, conference committee meetings, and in chamber during the floor debates. Whether he's been called on to project CPI, percentage points, or bond indebtedness, J.G. Scott has handled the burdens of being the messenger with a grace and with a gentle smile. All too often, the good deeds and the good work of individuals are left unnoticed and unacknowledged. Today is not one of those days. Today, the Kansas Senate joins in recognition the tireless dedication of J.G. Scott, who has performed countless good deeds with the intention, not for attention. Members of the Kansas Senate joining wishing J.G. Scott a well throughout his retirement. His tremendous, tireless service to Kansans is worthy of our deep appreciation, respect, and admiration. J.G., thank you for your tremendous dedication to helping others and for your servant's leadership here in Kansas. Though we lack your numeric experience, the Kansas Senate can safely estimate that you'll be missed beyond measure. Thank you very much.
Senator Masterson, did you want to say a few words? We're going to do this again. Okay. Well, we did want to share one little thing. So we did not want to do it next week. Next week is your last week with us. And too much emotion, and I'll be honest in sharing, the reason the majority leader read that is because I wasn't sure I could get through it myself. But we do have a little gift for you.
JG, let me have that because you can't do both. Go get yours.
So I can just speak from experience that, you know, sometimes when someone decides to retire, they need to kind of ease into it. And you've been responsible for counting our pennies, nickels, dimes, millions and billions. Probably, if we added it all up, it would be trillions and more. So here are some donations from my colleagues. So you will have some things to count those the first few weeks.
My wife has been worried what I'm going to be doing.
Tell her to worry no more. We so appreciate you. And I have to say it's been a real honor to have you sitting right there all of the years that I've been chair of this committee. And I know for many of us, we've got Senator Tyson of Tax. You sat right there. How many times did she turn around and say, JG, do you have that number? And you would say, it's approximately, but I'll get back. And that was exactly what the number was. But we wanted you to know you are respected, you are appreciated, and you're loved. And we will miss you. Committee meeting is adjourned.